Assalamu alaikum, Zubair. How are you?
Well, Salam Tariq, I'm doing good. How's it going in America?
It's all right. It's okay. We're hanging in there. How's in the UK right now with the lockdown?
I mean, we're coping with it. Some people are in tougher situations than others. And actually, a few days ago, I read in The Guardian something really shocking and a sad truth for a lot of people that domestic abuse killings have more than doubled during the coronavirus lockdown itself. And
Mm.
domestic violence is set to soar by 20%. 20% is a massive number during the global lockdown. So it's not just here in the UK, but around the world.
Also, it's really alarming what you mentioned about domestic violence. I was reading this article on the Review of Religions in which His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, he said 65% of marriage breakups are from among the love marriages, whereas arranged marriages have a lower rate of breakups. And, we often talk about love marriages versus arranged marriages. And I think that is also something that we'll be speaking in a little bit more detail today. And also cohabitation is really big in America. And, I was really surprised to find out that cohabitation is on the rise amongst people who are 50 years or older, which shows that people are genuinely, looking for love, finding their suitable partners, trying to get married as well. But that doesn't happen all the time. But I mean, people are dealing with these issues, dealing with these issues come with depression, loneliness, and God knows what. We really have to look into this matter. And I'm so glad we're talking about it today.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because the head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community, His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may God be his helper, he actually gave Amr Safid, who is the chief editor of the Review of Religions, the privilege of interviewing him about this particular topic. And this particular interview, which is amazing, and I urge everyone to read it, whether you're, like I said, whether you're married, whether you're not married, whether you've been through a breakup, read this interview, because he talks about from so many different levels and so many different aspects what true love actually is. And he even goes into so much detail in the sense that what the youth are doing and even the negative side of love. So you can actually see that on our website, reviewofreligions.org. But today we have an amazing guest that's going to come on the show. He's a friend of both of ours, but I'd let you introduce him.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Ahsan Khan is coming today to our show to talk about these issues. And I think you need somebody really, really experienced to listen, when it comes to these matters, because obviously we cannot deny that these things are happening. People are going through it. And Dr. Ahsan Khan is coming in. He's actually an eye surgeon. He has been married for 19 years. So that's a lot of experience.
It's a long time.
And he's also the head of the Department of Matrimony for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in the US. So let's see what he has to say.
The last time I met you was 2 years ago, I think. And the first place you took us was In-N-Out Burger.
Yeah, that's right. I remember
Still one of the best burgers I've had.
Oh man, now you're making me hungry and it's only 8 a.m.
The wrong time to think about that. Dr. Ahsan Khan, you're an expert and you're experienced in this field of helping people with their marriages and marital issues. But the first kind of question or comment I wanted to ask you was that, in LA, you've been, a community leader there for a number of years, dealing with young people. And I remember when I came to LA, we had a meeting with a lot of the kids and they were talking about their issues in terms of marriage and their future. But I feel that, a lot of young people don't want to go through this arranged marriage process anymore. And they kind of want to make it themselves. They want to go forward and have a so-called love marriage where they can find the partner themselves. So what do you think are the kind of the benefits of going through this arranged marriage? And obviously, if you can just explain a bit about how that actually works and at the end of the day is better for the couple than just finding somebody yourself.
Dating, and this is my opinion, dating requires a different set of skills than marriage. In dating, it's basically like a job interview. If you say you put on your best behavior, you put on your best look, you say all of the right things, you're trying to impress somebody. Whereas in an arranged marriage, which is based in Islam, again, it is such that you're not mingling with the other person. You're not looking just at those superficial aspects. You invest a lot in prayer and an inner soul searching of what kind of person you're looking for. You focus on character and the spirituality of it. So dating, on the other hand, you're not using those skills that you would need in marriage. For example, patience, or overlooking the faults of others. In dating, when that happens, it ends up being a broken relationship, and then you move on to the next one. And that could lend to frustration over and over again. Now, that doesn't mean that dating is a complete failure. You know, in Western communities, people get married. They may date 5, 10 different people, and after several years, they may get married and they live a long, successful life married together. So it's not to say that it's a completely failed system, but it's just rooted in those wrong elements that we focus on in Islam. So that's the message we try to convey.
It's interesting that you're talking about in the West how they date and how they kind of have these dating apps, but there was a program recently, I think it's on Netflix, called Love is Blind, where they're now trying to go the other direction. So they're saying, okay, what if you don't see the person and you get to know their personality? So you're behind a screen or you're faced the other way. And they spend like a week or 2 weeks and they say, okay, do you want to marry this person at the end of it? Because, you know, at the end of the day, the most attractive thing about a person is their personality.
In the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, our Khalifa, Mirza Masroor Ahmad, and I commend the Review of Religions for doing that question answer with Amir Safir Sahib, which was published recently. It was a fascinating piece. And in there, he asked His Holiness many questions that we're covering today on dating and on love at first sight and those different concepts, that different idea that's present between the West and Islamic countries, for example. One of the interesting fables or anecdotes that His Holiness shared was a story of a man who felt like he fell in love with a woman who was attractive, and he said he wanted to marry her, but the girl's father said that you don't even really know her, or you're just marrying her for outward beauty. And he said, no, I'm convinced that I'm in love with this woman. And so the story goes that he intentionally cut her hair, and she didn't eat as much, so her appearance started to look a little bit different. And then he approached the son and said, now look at my daughter. And he came up with an excuse why he no longer wants to marry her. And it basically proved his point that you're just looking at outward and you're not really looking at the inner qualities of my daughter. And the point being made is that if you focus on those superficial things, then you're really not going to know that person who you want to spend the rest of your life with.
You know, a lot of people say, and you're from America and obviously I'm in the UK, but a lot of people say in the West that finding true love is all about that click. It's all about that, you know, love at first sight, kind of see them across the room, you know, in a restaurant or something, and it's very romanticized. So do you think that's the reality, or, you know, are people kind of seeing it from the wrong angle?
True love is a debatable concept. It could be defined in different ways, but the reality is love at first sight. This concept really implies that what's important to you or the person who falls into this quote unquote love are superficial elements, beauty or their status. They won't define somebody's character. If you focus your efforts on finding that partner by looking at character or looking at their level of righteousness, God willing, you foster a successful marriage and you look back, those are the things that you're going to look back as the things that laid the foundation for true love.
You know, there's a lot of questions. A lot of people purposely delay looking for that suitable partner. People are actually purposely, they're ready for marriage, like they have a stable job, they're good to go, but they purposely delay it. So what would you say is the particular age to get married? Yeah,
that's a good question. I don't think there's a magical number, but the real question is that what are the legitimate purposes for delaying marriage? And to answer that, you have to then understand what is really the purpose of marriage, right? Because if your definition of the purpose of marriage is different, then you can justify waiting as long as you want until you get to that point. In Islam, for example, marriage is a cornerstone of life. It's a very, very sacred and important institution. In fact, it's part of being a Muslim. The Prophet of Islam, may peace and blessings of God be upon him, he said in one tradition that marriage completes the faith, which when you think about it is a very profound thing, right? The Quran, the book of Islam, it talks about this. And it says that, you know, marriage is a union between two souls. In that verse where it talks about marriage and it introduces this concept, it basically says that marriage is rooted in fear of God or righteousness, what we call in Arabic taqwa. If marriage means completing your faith, and if marriage is the basis or foundation of being a righteous person, then it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to delay marriage from that aspect. And then there's the practical side of it. The practical side of it is that a marriage preserves chastity. In Islam, we believe that morality and chastity is very important. When you reach a certain age, you're going to want to develop physical relationships. That's a creation of God that's innate in all human beings. And to fulfill those physical desires, marriage achieves that. But I don't think there's a magic number. I just think that the premise would be, why is marriage important to you? And if you feel it's important for the reasons that I outlined, then it doesn't make sense to wait.
Dr. Ahsan, how do you explain to the youth to not look at the outward beauty and focus on the inner beauty in an age where there's Bollywood, there's Hollywood, and they're showing these fantasies, almost like perfect lifestyle or perfection in figures or individuals? How do you tell the youth to manage this type of influence that they haven't, and then how can they manage that and come towards something like an arranged marriage? Even though, as His Holiness also mentioned in the article that you're referring to, that, it's okay, you can meet the person in a proper setting before the suitable person that you're trying to get married to, in a proper setting before marriage. But people have a different view of their ideal person, their spouse. How can they manage that? What do you have to say for that?
First of all, I encourage the youth to pray. Prayer is the root of all actions that we do as Muslims. And it's part of what we do as a ritual every day. And the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community, Mirza Ahmad, he would pray for the marriage of his daughter when she was only a few years old. He would start praying for her future match, her future husband, when she was only a few years old. And so I would say to parents, pray for your children that they can find a righteous spouse and live a happy life. The verse of the Quran that talks about marriage, it talks about the importance of fear of God and prayer 5 times in the single verse. And it is that reason that eventually when a man and a woman in Islam get married and they have what's called the nikah or marriage ceremony, that same prayer is recited in that ceremony as a reminder that God brought the two of you together, but the whole basis of your marriage is in prayer.
So Dr. Ahsan, one of the last points that I wanted to mention was that during the lockdown, we've seen on social media and on the internet that divorces and breakups and even domestic violence is on the rise in people's homes. And some people don't have a way out of that. So why do you think that is?
The main reason is that everybody is at home and spouses are spending more time together, particularly at times where they normally wouldn't interact. There was a woman on TV who jokingly said, I married my husband to have breakfast and dinner with him, not lunch. And basically what she meant was, the middle of the day, for spouses, they usually on a working day don't interact with one another. And all of a sudden they're being put in a position where they are forced to continue in their element. His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad, he has a beautiful quote. Whenever somebody asks him for advice on marriage, the answer that he gives is that when your spouse does something that you don't like or says something that is displeasing to you, close your eyes, close your ears, close your mouth. But when your spouse does something that is pleasing to you, then open all 3. And basically what it means is that we acknowledge that as humans, we have flaws and our spouses have flaws. But that's what's the beauty of marriage, that you, as the Quran says, quote unquote, you seek comfort in your spouse. Seeking comfort in your spouse is a commandment of the Holy Quran. Of all the many lessons that we've learned from this viral outbreak, this very unfortunate outbreak, there is some silver lining, as you would say, or there's some glimmer of positivity in this, is that it's an opportunity for us to strengthen or even mend our relationships and understand our spouses a little bit better. I mean, I can tell you, I've learned something about my spouse as well too. She does a lot of things during the day. She's an engineer by profession. She was working for years. And then after we got married, she decided to sacrifice her career and to raise our children. So she's at home and this is her office. But now we're in her office, so to speak. And
we're taking up her space right now.
Yeah, I'm in her space right now. And in observing her during the day, I realized that there's so many things that she's doing that go unnoticed. And I never really had an opportunity to recognize those and validate her efforts until I saw them myself. I come home and sometimes there's a wonderful dinner being made and I thank her and say, oh, this is really, really good. But I never get to actually see all the painstaking efforts that go into it. And now that I get to see that firsthand, it creates a newfound appreciation. And I know to kind of back away from that kitchen because this is her element. I'm not going to go near it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Ahsan. And you know what? Also convey our thanks or gratitude to your wife who allowed this interview to happen.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if you're going through a relationship or you're looking to get married or you're actually already married and you're trying to sustain that marriage for a long term, I highly recommend that you read this article, which was published by the Review of Religions. It is called True Love and the Perfect Life Partner, a special interview with the worldwide head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. For more, log on to the reviewofreligions.org and also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube.